Hi guys, and welcome to our next theoretical video. This video is going to be fully theoretical, and here I'm going to explain some fundamentals about web servers. What are they, how they are working, what they are used for, and why do we need to actually know and understand how can we hack them. So the web server, I think, is nowadays the most vulnerable and hackable platform or service, in other words, because it can store multiple functionality in there. It can store the web application itself, and basically there are a lot of vulnerabilities that can occur when engaging the web server. So I think it's really important to actually learn how you can hack the web server in order to get access to a system, because there can be multiple ways and doorways to actually create your way through the machine itself. So now let's just start by explaining what's a web server and how does it work. So basically the web server is just a server that can actually save and upload our files online. So let's say we have files, we have directories over there, and we want them to be online, to be visible by others. And by installing a web server, which is basically a simple software, this can be possible. So the web server is just software that gets all the files in the specified directory and just uploads them to a World Wide Web, so everyone can see it depending on what IP you've actually uploaded the files. Do you enable your firewall to actually allow connections? And just if everything's alright, the files can be accessible from everywhere around the world. So the web server is mainly used for storing such information, and in most cases the web server is storing pages like HTML pages and PHP pages, just the web applications, the website. This means the web application. So the web server is just storing that information to the online. It can store even directories, files, pictures, music and videos, just every file you can think of. The web server can store it online, so it can be accessible. Many web server has the option for downloading that file upon accessing them, but as we said, the main advantage of having web servers is to actually make your application, make your website public, to be able to visit from everywhere, and so on. People can use the web servers in order to access your web application and start using your web application. When the server is actually uploading pages like HTML pages, what does happen is basically the browser is somehow interpreting and compiling that pages, the code of that page, and it actually shows the results to you. So the web server is also making your machine to act like a server, like on a specified port, for example 80 or 8080. Now, the web server is actually forcing your machine to listen for a connection on that specific port, and when a connection comes, depending on what you configure it, the server is gonna either allow or block that connection. So basically your machine is now working as a server on that specific port. Keep in mind that nowadays every website you see and visit is actually hosted on a web server and is actually using a web server, no matter what the technologies and what the server is, for example Apache or Nginx. All these sites you visit in an application use are standing right there on a web server, so you're actually being able to see that information. So this is the benefit of the web server. This is how it works. It just takes the file on a specified directory and just uploads it online, so anyone can visit it with some kind of a URL or directly approaching the IP, which is not good practice. And we're gonna explain why in the future. So now let's just move on and explain what's actually hacking, and especially hacking the web server. So basically hacking is gaining access, gaining high privileges, steal sensitive information. We as a hacker want to control or the network or the server or the machine. We have not just want to break the machine down or to deny of service the machine. This is not what hacking is all about. The hacking is all about gaining access and actually high privileged access to a specified machine or a target. So therefore we can actually spread and control over the whole network, and this is what we as a as a hacker exactly wants. And of course, after the hacking procedure is over, we always want to actually remain stealth, cover our tracks, and therefore remain sustained in that machine or that network we've actually hacked in. So we don't want to get caught, and we want only to be persistent there and to have the control anytime we want to whatsoever. So now we can talk about how can we actually hack a web server. So basically the hacking starts with very simple information gathering as always. Before we actually need to hack something, we need to know everything about the target. For example, IPs, records, DNS records, whois information, and just many more stuff. We've covered how can you actually gather information in the previous videos, but now we're just repeating that what we learned. So before actually hacking, we need to actually gather information about a server, either passive and active. And you know what's the difference? The passive is just collecting information from open source, but active is when we are directly interacting with the server and directly interacting with that IP. So if you're not sure what those two methods are, go back please and watch our information gathering video, where I'm explaining all you need to know about information gathering, and we can gather information for basically anything, no matter person, no matter machine, no matter servers, and just anything. So therefore we can search for a potential weak spot or vulnerabilities. This is a standard procedure, like based on that information we can go and search for any kinds of vulnerabilities, and therefore we can make a priority to what of them gonna do the work for us and which one of them is just the most important for us. Afterwards we can analyze that vulnerabilities, see what we can come up with, and therefore start thinking about attack vectors, attack strategies, and start thinking about what can we do in order to get access to that system. So therefore we need to actually develop or search for an exploit. As we said, we can develop ourselves, which is harder of course, but the better choice, or we can search for exploits that are already available in the web, so we can actually download them and use them. And for example, the databases of the exploits are again running on web servers. They are just hosted on some kind of web servers, and so we can download even the exploits for the web servers from web servers. So we cannot use web without the web server. So they are quite important, they are everywhere, and that's why we need to learn how to hack them, because many vulnerabilities can occur when we encounter such server. And therefore we need to use that exploit to exploit the vulnerabilities of that server to that machine in order to gain access to that server, to our target, and therefore we can start becoming persistent and hiding our tracks. So we're gonna break into that 6 sections, and I'm gonna explain every single one of them in details, and therefore we can go and skip to the practical videos where we're actually going to hack the web servers themselves. So where I'm going to explain you how you can set up one, where to download, and how can we potentially hack that web server. So the first thing is basically gathering information. Like when you begin every project, when you actually interact with any kind of target, before you actually do anything whatsoever, you need to have a pretty decent amount of information about the target. It can be like IPs, like all the IPs, all the records, or DNS records. You must have all the available information out there. So first you have to do the passive scan, because you won't get detected. As we said before, when you are doing active scan, you have chances of being detected if you are not careful. So first we are going to do passive in order to stay safe and see what information can we get from the passive scan. So when we are basically targeting a web server, we need to actually see all about the IP address of the server. We can convert the IP address of the URL of the web server to an IP address with some tools, for example DNS dumpster, and therefore we can start analyzing if there are any additional web servers. Is the web server connected to any other server? Is the web server connected to any other web server? and therefore we can start searching for different pages, different directories. We can start searching for even more records. We can start search for even more information, for example, who it belongs, and just many more stuff. And although we can even go and browse the web application that stands on that web server to see if we can find any value and vulnerable there. And for example, we can do the same procedure for every amount of web servers we found. For example, if we are targeting a huge domain, we can see that there are multiple web servers connected to that domain, and therefore we can start actually browsing every single one of the pages of the web application to see if we can find any valuable information, any vulnerable spots, so we can basically furthermore exploit them and gain access. So this is about the passive information gathering, and about the active, we can use commands like ping to see the IP address of the web server. Therefore, we can try to interact directly with the IP, so there is instant one vulnerability found. We can try to use tools like Nmap, Zenmap to see all the available ports, because in most cases the web servers are not just web servers. They are a complex combination of MySQL servers, database servers, maybe FTP or SSH servers, so the server need to have some kind of remote access to administrators. So there are many other services, and therefore we can use tools like Netcat to see if we can interact with that services, if we can actually log into an FTP server, if we can actually see the banner of every different services, and therefore we can start building attack vectors. And of course the Metasploit one, where we can use scanning modules to see what information can we extract from that server. And for example, we can use the enumeration modules in Metasploit to see the version of the web server and to see if there are any vulnerabilities about that specific version. So the information gathering here is very important. You need to know as much as possible in order to get into a machine, and you need to keep yourself in track. So we are going to attack a server, so we are going to implement only the server-side attacks. We are not going for client-side, since the server is not working as a client, it's just a server. He's just standing there and listening for connections, and we are going to exploit that listening for a connection. Because, for example, the most exploits of the servers are when you are not sending a connection, a basic standard user connection. You are sending a malicious instructions that can actually follow to getting a reverse shell or getting more privileges, more access, than just hacking the server. Keep in mind that hacking is gaining access, not about crashing the server. Hacking is just going to that server, making it yours, and therefore you can start exploiting furthermore the network. So now let's talk about how to search for potential vulnerabilities or weak spot. So basically, when you gather the whole information you can with all the records, with all the tools we've mentioned, now it's time to actually collect that information, analyze it, and see can we use something from that information. Is there something valuable there, or everything actually there is not going to do the work for us? And to do that, we need to actually search for a lot of things. For example, we can search for the old versions. We can search for if there are any encrypted communication. We have searched for if there are any unused ports or ports that are in services which are vulnerable. And therefore, we can search for many more things. For example, anonymous FTP login, free FTP login, and just tools that can give us basic access, because when we have basic access, there's the chance of us getting privilege escalation techniques higher. So we need to either go for some basic access to the machine, or we have to go for the old versions where they're going to bring us some vulnerabilities out there. And furthermore, we can apply the exploits, use the exploits, and exploit the vulnerability so we can get into that system and hack. So for example, when the Nmap scan complete, you can take all the services by every single one and try to actually analyze what are all the services doing. And for example, the web servers are most likely Apache or Nginx, and therefore there's always a version about them. Therefore we can go and start analyzing the version. Are there any vulnerabilities, and if there are any, can they do the work for us? Because there are cases where The only vulnerabilities about that current web server is just DOSing, which actually is not going to do the work. But there are cases when you can find some vulnerabilities like buffer overflow, and therefore there's instructions about how can you implement and do such an attack. You can find vulnerabilities such uploading a malicious software, uploading a malicious file, and therefore remotely executing, gaining a reverse shell. And depending on that version, depending on that service, you can find a lot of vulnerabilities. Of course, you can search for tools like Searchsploit and manual checking in search engines, but we have to look for mainly the versions, and if the versions is not vulnerable to what we exactly want, therefore we can start actually hacking different services in order to gain access over the whole machine. Because if you gain access to the whole machine, we can access the web server as well, and we can control the web server as well. So mainly we are focused on that specific web server, but if we cannot find the vulnerability that suits our need, it's a good practice to go for other services. And of course, how can we seek for potential exploits using databases like search engines? All search engines can reference to all the databases. For example, ExploitDB, Rapid7. We can use tools like Searchsploit. We can manually specify the versions and see if we can get any vulnerability for there. So checking for. We also have a video for vulnerability analysis. If you do not watch that, please go back and see that video, the theoretical one. There I explain all you have to do about analyzing vulnerabilities. So now let's move on into how we can exploit the web server. So basically, whenever we find an exploit, we can simply just run it and see can we do the work. That's the most obvious and simple scenario, and the scenario we are going for, because we want to lose some more time in searching for more exploits and more vulnerabilities. We just want to actually shoot one exploit and make it happen and make it to get a reverse shell and to gain access. So for example, if that's successful, great, we're okay, we're good to go, we're inside the system if that exploit works. But if it not works, we have to try every single possible logins where it's allowed to. For example, therefore, if the exploits didn't work, we can try for getting basic usual privileges there, right? For example, the basic user one. We can start going for FTP credentials, we can start going for some SSH credentials, we can use Metasploit to enumerate the SSH versions if it's vulnerable and allows to. And therefore we can try some simple SSH brute force, we can try some FTP brute forces to see some FTP default logins. Therefore we can go and visit the web applications and try logins over there, because from the web applications we can actually gain access and touch things in the bottom level, so the web servers and the other services to the machine. From the web application we can actually control and use the machine. So it's very good if we can actually manage to get something off from the web applications. So it's always a good practice to try all the possible logins where it's possible. Therefore, we need to actually specify and priority our exploits and actions. For example, if we have 3 exploits that can actually get a reverse shell, we have to go for the one that is most secured for us. So the most secured for us means more stealth, means that the exploit is less likely to break the system, and so the chance of us getting caught is smaller. So that's the way the criteria where we need to actually sort our exploits and actions. We don't want us to get caught, so that's why we need to make a priority about every single action and every single exploit out there. So if everything fails from the both actions, now it's time to go for the web application itself. And therefore we can start and searching for different vulnerabilities, different exploits, and start actually attacking the web application, which is the topic of our next module. And there we're going to explain everything you need to know about the web applications. So for now we are just focused on the web server, on the network part of the servers, and so we are more focused about sending packets, sending malicious packets. That's all about networking exploits. But on the other side, in the web applications, we're going to be more focused on throwing different parameters, modifying requests, and you're going to see all that in future actions. So now let's move on into how can we become actually persistent when we actually get into a system, what can we do when we actually hack in, and how we can actually secure ourselves for future actions. So basically the first option is to create ourselves a script, and the second option is basically to download one, because there are also many ready ones that can do the work and work quite well. But if you're not sure in them, you just can create your own script. But before you're creating your own script, you must test it several times to see how it works. And for example, you must be sure in order to use it in action. So basically, in most cases, the tools that I use for scripting are Python, Bash, and PowerShell, because all of that tools can actually easily run commands. PowerShell can do multiple things, for example, downloading files and executing in time-lapse. Bash and Python can do that as well, but this is the top priorities for me: Python, Bash, and PowerShell. And about downloading the script, you can go and search for every search engine you want, including DuckDuckGo, Google, and therefore you can also search in GitHub and more websites like that. But the way you can go and become persistent is basically when you create a script or download a script, and that script is actually executing and giving the machine the instructions every single time. So there is two ways of actually become persistent. One way is where you are actually forcing the machine to connect to you, get in reverse shell, like in some kind of a time lapse. And the other method is when you are actually set some vulnerability out there, so you can exploit it whenever you want. So you have to choose between the two options. One of the options is forcing the machine to get a reverse shell to you anytime in a time lapse. So be careful, because the bot methodology can actually review your disguise, and therefore you can lose your control to that machine whatsoever. You have to be really careful and choose your method twice, because, for example, when you are setting a vulnerability on that machine and you are exploiting that vulnerability every time you actually want to get access to that machine, you are stored in some kind of a log files. You can actually get triggered, and the attention can come to you, so you can get revealed. So you have to be careful. You have to choose the vulnerability very wise, very careful, in order to actually be protected from that kind of things. You won't get caught at all. But on the other side, when you are forcing the machine to actually connect to you in some kind of a time lapse, you are actually doing quite the same thing. You can actually force someone to see what's happening and what's that strange activity with that machine. You can actually reveal our disguise as well. So you have to be really careful about choosing what technology you want to implement there, and choosing what methodology you want to actually use for becoming persistent. You're gonna see all that in future practical videos. We're gonna demonstrate both of those ways, and therefore we're gonna analyze and closely look what can we upgrade and do more sufficient. Now let's talk about how can you hide your tracks. And for example, we can delete all the log files when we connect that machine. So now in that state we already connected to that machine, so we can, for example, delete the log files if there are any. We always want to check if there are any log files, and there are logs in for example, in Unix they are located in /var/logs. In Windows we can access them through administrative tools, or in C Windows System32, and therefore we need to actually see and specify and delete actually the log files, so we are not actually written anywhere. So if anyone see the log file, he won't see our presence there, because they generate automatically. They generate really huge information in every single second, and so on. We're gonna actually hide our tracks by deleting that kind of log files, especially if they are responsible for logging all the networking out there. Therefore, we can remove any files that were stored during the attack. So the attack can potentially lead to some files there. We can either send files, support different files, and from that files we can get a remote code execution or reverse shell. and therefore the files must be deleted in order to hide our tracks. Because if you did not delete the files and someone, for example the system administrator, see the files, he gonna know that something malicious is happening and you may be already in that system. So deleting this file is kind of important, it's kind of crucial. So you always want to hide your track and delete every single file possible, every single file generated by you, of course. Because when you once you get to the system, therefore you start becoming persistent with different scripts where you implement on, for example, kernel level, and you force them to run in backdoor, so no one can notice anything. That's the point of actually staying persistent, to run scripts, to run instructions that are actually unnoticeable, that stay reusable in the operational system, and they directly run instructions without any user interaction and without anything pops up on a window whatsoever. So hiding your track is just quite the next step you have to take. You have to actually remove all the files that can be disclosed, can be reviewed, and can potentially reveal your intentions to that specified target. Therefore, we have to spoof the MAC address and the IP address, because if we actually get caught or if we forgot to delete the log files, the spoofed IP address would be there but not our real one. So for example, if there are some mechanisms, some scripts, or the people themselves are blocking the IP address that they count as malicious, they're going to block the spoofed IP address and not yours. So that's why you need to always spoof your IP address, always spoof your MAC address, so you seem like you're someone else who you are not. And that's mainly the point of hiding your track, because with spoofed IP address, with spoofed MAC address, while when deleting all the files you've stored and all the log files you are written in, you have completely covered your tracks, and you need to only be careful. And the next thing you have to do is basically to try not to perform actions that can risk your cover. For example, you don't want to open Windows, you don't want to open some applications and text that can actually be output on a screen. You don't want to play any kind of noise or audio. You just want to stay in the backdoor, stay very low in the operational system, and just operate everything from there. Not interacting with any graphical user interface programs, because they're gonna display into the server's monitor, and if there's someone, you're gonna get discovered. They're gonna know that there's something suspicious over there, because servers by default are working as servers. They do not actually use the programs, they are just waiting for a connection. And if some programs suddenly popped up, the people there are gonna know that there's something different, and they're gonna start performing actions for removing you, further investigating and see that you are there and just removing you. So do not perform risky for your cover actions. This is the very last thing you have to do when you actually successfully become persistent and actually hidden your tracks with the techniques above. So this is the procedure you have to do. You have to actually first become persistent, because the persistence can generate also files, and therefore you have to think for a way to hide that files or just make them not suspicious. And therefore you have to delete all the log files. You have to hide your track. You have to spoof your IP and MAC address before actually connecting to that machine. So therefore you are working like someone else. And after everything is done, after you've hidden your tracks and you've become persistent, now is the time to actually really just play careful and do not do any actions that can actually go and discover your true self. So this is the basic procedure and the basic theory of hacking web servers. I really appreciate you guys for watching. If there's any questions, pop them below. This is the basic methodology of web servers, how they work. As we've spoken before, they are just software that uploads every file in a directory they are configured to. And if the uploaded content is just HTML pages or PHP pages, the compiler of the web browser is just representing the codes or the HTML tags in a way that we can see and represent that. So we get a pretty nice overview about the pages. We don't see the HTML content. We see some pictures, some styles. If the user implements some CSS over there, we're going to see that too. So basically, the web server is hosting, is just uploading everything that stores in a specified directory. It can be files, directory, pictures, it can be anything. It can be web applications. And we thought that web application is just a combination of different HTML or PHP pages, and combined they just do different kind of functionality. For example, web application is where you can upload, download, and just see and browse. We're gonna speak all about that in the future. We have a module about web application hacking, but keep in mind that the web browser is just doing that. It's just getting all the files and uploading them online, so everyone can visit it. And that forces that machine of installing the web server. It forces the machine that to be acting as a server. So therefore, it's not actually requesting. It's just listening for a connection and waiting for a request from someone else. So by installing a web server, our machine becomes a server on port 80, and by definition, many more services come with the web one. For example, SSH, FTP, because every system administrator needs some kind of a remote access to that server and to be able to modify everything there. So there are also a lot of services running out there. And this is the basic and the fundamentals theory about the web servers. I've explained how they work. I've explained what they are structured of, the different type of web servers. The most used of them are Apache and Nginx, and therefore you can either try to download every single one of them, see how they work, see what the difference about them, and we can go and start looking for different exploits for that web servers in the practical videos. So thank you everyone for watching, and see you in the next video.